One of the biggest mistakes that I see parents make, and I made this mistake too, is to try to help your child to independently sit by propping them up to sit. I thought that placing my daughter in sitting would help her brain to learn how to sit. But the problem with that method is that sitting is not static. Sitting is dynamic. In a child's development, sitting is actually a transitional stage. When your child knows how to dynamically sit, they can transition out of sitting into crawling, into standing, or back down onto the floor. Now, I didn't know any of that when I was trying to help my daughter learn how to sit, so I propped her to sit, and she ended up learning how to sit something like this. Her pelvis rolled under, her legs spread wide for balance, her arms out for balance so she wouldn't fall over. And she sat like that because her brain was missing all of the tiny millions of pieces of information about how her pelvis, her spine, and her head were connected and could move together and separate to maintain her balance. She only knew how to move her pelvis in one way, rolled under. So when I propped her to sit, she only had one option in sitting, this. Now, I thought this was great because she had accomplished that milestone check mark of independently sitting, but I didn't realize that she was missing out on these dynamic movements. In this position here, if she tried to reach a toy, she would literally fall over. She didn't know how to adjust her pelvis, her spine, and her head to maintain her balance when she reached out for something. In this position here, she could not transfer into a crawling position. Again, if she moved her arm like this or looked backwards, she would lose her balance and topple over. Once I realized that her brain was missing all of these foundational pieces of information about how her own body moved, that's when I could backtrack and give her brain the information that it needed so she could truly independently sit. So what's going to accelerate your child's learning to sit independently is to not focus on the end result, but to focus on the transitions. So their brain has the chance to experience the coordination of all their body parts. So here's just 3 basic transitions of how your child might naturally figure out how to get up into sitting on their own. The first way from transitioning from lying to sitting is simply rolling through the side and coming up into side sitting. Now, some kids figure out how to transition into sitting with this baby pose of holding their feet, rolling and rocking from side to side, and eventually they roll through the side and they come up into sitting like this. And a third transition of coming into sitting is some kids love to be on their bellies and they figure out how to slide their knee up. They roll their head and their torso over that knee and come up into side sitting like this. So this week, simply observe, how is your child naturally getting themselves into sitting? How are they transitioning from lying on the floor and getting up into sitting? Now, if your child isn't able to do any of those transitions yet, I'm going to show you what to do. But if your child is getting up in one of those transitions, this week, simply observe what are they doing and then use your hands to slow down the transition to bring their brains awareness to their different body parts of how they're coordinating everything. So if your child is able to roll themselves up into side sitting on their own, all you have to do is use your soft, gentle hands to highlight different body parts. I like to highlight those 3 main areas, the head, the spine, and the pelvis, because that really is the key for the brain to be able to coordinate complex movements like sitting, crawling, and walking. So however your child is rolling around on the floor, almost coming up into a sitting position, simply place your hands on their hip bones, on their pelvis, and just observe with your hand. Bring their brain's attention to how they're rolling around. One hip bone might be sliding this way and that way as they're getting into sitting and back down onto the floor. Or you can bring their brain's attention to the rib area here, the chest, so the upper spine area as they're rolling around, getting ready to come into sitting. You're just using your hands like a little spotlight for their brain, saying, hey, remember you have ribs that can move, you have a upper spine that could maybe move, as well as the pelvis. And then once you get comfortable, shining a spotlight with your hands on their different body parts, the pelvis, the ribs, see if there's a possibility that you can slow them down a little bit. Bring their attention to the actual transition. Create the space and the opportunity for them to feel their pelvis rolling like a ball as they come up into side sitting. Create the space and opportunity for them to feel each individual rib roll and move and squish and expand as they come up into sitting. The more aware their brain is of how all these different body parts connect and can move independently, the better balance they're going to have in every single milestone position. Now, if your child isn't transitioning into sitting quite yet, give the basic rolling to the side every time you pick your child up, because guess what? As you roll your child to the side, hand on the pelvis, roll the pelvis forward and down. They come into a side sitting position. You're just supporting their head with your arm here, one hand on the pelvis, and you can slow everything down. Allow their brain the time and space to feel the transition of this position, the rolling of the head forward, the bearing weight through the arm. You can pause here, the rolling of the pelvis one way and the other, swinging the head forward, coming up into a side sitting position before you slide your hand under the tush and pick them all the way up. And you can do the opposite every time you place your child down. Place them into a side sitting position, one hand on the pelvis, supporting their head and torso with your other hand, exploring the rolling of the pelvis, the swinging of the head forward, and slowing that transition down of rolling through the side, resting the head down on the floor, and rolling into lying down. So by slowing down, you give their brain a chance to feel how all of these little body parts are connected and can move together and separate, creating these opportunities for their brain to make sense of all of this information so they can use it independently. So go out this week, observe how your child is transitioning into sitting on their own. Observe with your hands, bring their brain's attention to what they're doing on different body parts, the pelvis, the ribs, the spine. Slow everything down. And if your child isn't transitioning into sitting on their own, practice that rolling through the side, slowly feeling each body part move and rotate as you're bringing them up into a sitting position and then up into your arms. And in the next videos, I'll go over more details on how to slow down the other two transitions so that your child has more options. So stay tuned and we'll go over the baby pose roll transition, as well as the transition from on the tummy, sliding the leg over and into a side sitting position. Hopefully that was helpful, and we will see you in the next video. Okay, bye.